Having discussed classical theory of employment and output determination in the previous class, we now discuss the factors which are the ultimate determinants of employment and output in the classical model. Ultimate determinants of employment and output in the classical model. That is, we consider the exogenous factors when changed causes change in the level of output and employment. The level of output, employment and real wage are the endogenous factors, and change in the endogenous factors is determined by exogenous factors. So our concern here is to explain what are the exogenous factors which causes change in endogenous factors, output and employment. In the classical model, factors that determine output and employment are the factors that determine the position of labor supply and labor demand schedules. In the classical model, factors that determine the level of employment and output are the factors that determine the position of labor supply and labor demand curves, and also the position of aggregate production function and the position of aggregate production function. Now, aggregate production function shifts over time by technical change that alters the amount of output forthcoming for a given level of inputs. If there is an improvement in technology, aggregate production function will shift upwards and the same level of inputs will produce more output, or technology is a shift factor in the production function. Also, production function will shift over time due to changes in the capital stock. Remember this, the short-run production function is drawn on the assumption that state of technology is a constant, capital is also fixed, is kept constant at a fixed level. So if there is a change in technology, technical progress, or if there is an increase in the supply of capital, production function will shift upwards. Same level of inputs will produce more output. And as we know that labor demand curve is the MPL curve, marginal product of labor, MPL curve. Labor demand is MPL curve, and it is the slope of the production function as we have derived in the previous class. So the position of the labor demand curve will shift if productivity of labor changes. That is, as it is the slope of the production function, if there is an increase in the productivity of labor, then MPL curve will shift towards the right, and productivity of labor will increase due to technical change. Labor become more productive due to change in the capital stock, so that capital labor ratio will increase and labor will become more productive. So MPL will shift if there is an improvement in the productivity of labor. Similarly, from the derivation of the LS curve, labor supply curve, we have shown that this relation will change if the size of the labor force changes. If the size of labor force changes, and size of the labor force changes due to population growth. if there is an increase in the population, labor supply curve will shift towards the right. Also, labor supply curve will shift towards the right or left depending on change in the labor leisure preference. If the society's preference for labor increases, it will shift towards the right, or if the preference for leisure increases, it will shift towards the left, like that. So, in the classical model, the level of output and employment. In the classical model, the level of output and employment are determined entirely by supply factors. Supply factors. That is an improvement in technology, an increase in the productivity of labor, an increase in the supply of labor, etc. And because of the supply determined nature of output and employment in the classical model, we consider the properties of labor supply and labor demand schedules more formally. This analysis is important for getting more insight about what determines the level of output and employment in the classical model. Now, as is given in this figure, part A reproduces the supply of labor and demand for labor curves, which we have derived earlier. Supply of labor and demand for labor curves derived earlier, where these are determined by W by P. So it is W1 by P1. And in the part B, supply of labor and demand for labor are specified as functions of money wage. Here, supply of labor and demand for labor are shown as functions of money wage. Here, supply of labor and demand for labor are shown as functions of real wage, W by P. Now, for the labor supply schedule, we can derive positively sloped supply curves such as SL P1, SL P1. And this SL P1 gives different levels of labor supplied for each value of money wage given price P1. If P1 is fixed, price is fixed at P1, this positively sloped SL curve shows that as money wage increases, supply of labor increases. This is because for a given price level, more money wage means more real wage. W by P, if P is constant, if W increases, real wage increases. So supply of labor curve is positively sloped. And as we have stated earlier, workers are interested in real wage. So naturally, each price level has a different SL supply of labor curve. Workers are interested in real wage, and in the classical model it is assumed that workers have perfect knowledge about prices. So it is assumed that they have full knowledge about real wage. So for each price level there is a different curve. So for a given money wage, each price level means a different real wage and hence a different amount of labor is supplied. So if a price level is P2, price level is, not P2, is 2P1, 3P1 like this. If price level is P1, 2P1, 3P1. If price level is given as 2P1, 2P1 means twice P1. labor supply curve will shift towards the left as SL2P1. That means less labor is supplied at any money wage. So if P1 doubles, then for the old money wage, only L1 amount of labor is supplied now. Initially, the labor supply was LE. Now only W1 amount of labor, L1 amount of labor is supplied. And as price level again increases to 3P1, SL shift again for the same money wage, less amount of labor will be supplied if you extend this curve like this. So, as price level increases, labor supply curve will shift towards the left if plotted against money wage. If a labor supply curve is plotted against money wage, it is shifted towards the left if price level increases from P1, 2P1, 3P1 like this. Now, that an individual worker is interested only in the real wage results from the fact that at W1 P1, the real wage is W1 by P1. And if a price is 2P1, then we have the real wage 2W1 by 2P1. 2W1 by 2P1. That is the combination which ensures same real wage, and 3W1 by 3P1. Same combination, because W1 by P1 equal to 2W1 by 2P1, 3W by 1, 3P1 and like. That means the conclusion is equiproportional increase in W and P keeps quantity of labor supplied unchanged. If prices are doubled, money wages are also doubled, supply of labor will remain constant. This is because real wages are not affected. Now consider the labor demand schedule plotted against money wage. We utilize the fact that demand for labor is also a function of real wage, and as DL is equal to function of W by P, we can write DL is a function of real wage, and we can write W by P, demand for labor is also a function of real wage. And remember also the condition that labor market equilibrium, in equilibrium demand for labor is determined by the condition W by P is equal to MBL, the condition for profit maximization. Real wage is equal to MBL. And if we want to know the quantity of labor demanded at any money wage, as in the case of quantity of labor supplied, the answer depends on the price level. Given the money wage W, the employment is given as W is equal to MBL into P from this relation. W is equal to MBL into P. And at successively higher levels of P, as P1, 2P1, 3P1, etc., labor demand curve plotted against the money wage shifted towards the right. The reason is that at a given money wage, a higher price means a lower real wage. So, more labor will be demanded at any money wage. For example, if price becomes L2, or let me take it as L2. If price level become 2P1 for the money wage W1, how much labor is demanded, L2 labor is demanded. Similarly, we can draw other points like that, because for a given money wage, a higher price means lower real wage when plotted against a money wage. So again we have the condition equiproportional increase in price and money wage and price leave labor market equilibrium at LE. And now the point is, if P1 is the price, the combination SL and MBL into P1 ensures level of employment equal to LE. If price becomes 2P1, then demand for labor curve is this, supply of labor curve is this, equilibrium is again at LE. If price is 3P1 and MBL and SL, again this point. So equiproportional increase in price level and money wage leaves labor market equilibrium intact. This is a basic result of classical theory of employment and output determination. That means if money wages and prices are increased in the same proportion, labor market equilibrium is not affected. And this information is utilized for constructing what is known as classical aggregate supply curve. The information provided in this graph is used to derive the classical aggregate supply function that we will do in the next class.